Voter identification laws have been one of the most controversial things in not only recent times, but just throughout history when it comes to voting within the United States. On one hand, it does provide a sense of security in knowing that voter fraud is much harder to commit. And on another hand, which I do not agree with, and this is the opposing view, is that it limits certain people from not being able to vote. And I do not believe that. Missouri is one of the 36 states that does require voter identification, and they make it very easy. And I think people just really don't get the sense of how easy it is to obtain one of these identifications. As a Missourian, you can use a wide variety of identification, such as identification issued by the state of Missouri, an agency of the state, or a local election authority of the state. Identification issued by the United States government, identification issued by an institution of higher education, and this includes a university, college, vocational, and educational school, but it has to be located within the state of Missouri. Or you can use, and this is what my parents use, a copy of a current utility bill, bank statement, paycheck, government check, or really any governmental document that does contain both the voter's name and their address. And some people may view this as a difficulty for them to obtain one of these. However, Missouri makes it quite easy, and I believe all states can make it this easy. If a voter wants a non-driving ID specifically for voting, you can get one from the Missouri Department of Revenue with no charge. So this is free and it's very easy to obtain. I observed many other states' voter ID laws, and I truly do believe Missouri is one of the best. Another state whose voter ID laws I can stand behind is our neighboring state, Arkansas. Arkansas requires both a photo and a name on their identifications whenever they're in the poll box. However, there are sadly states that do not require these voter identifications. California, in almost all cases, does not require a form of identification. This troubles me very much that the state who holds the most power in the Electoral College does not require any form of identification at the polls. Another place that does not require voter identification is Washington, D.C. Once again, I find this very strange considering Washington, D.C. is where a lot of our governmental programs are at. And I feel like it is very important that, the people within there should require voter identification. And I think it's strange how they do not properly manage who is allowed to vote there. People will try and argue with voter identification and state that it limits certain people from voting. If every state adopted the Missouri system of easily accessible identification, this would not be a problem at all. I mean, voter identification in Missouri is one of the easiest, and I have looked over every single state, and I really do think Missouri is one of the easiest. Voter fraud can be a serious problem to consider in future elections if we keep the current system. Without identification, anyone can vote, and I find that very scary, and voter fraud is very easy to commit. Even with the 2020 election, there's a sense of chaos due to the mail-in ballots, and a year later, there is still controversy over this. With the implementation of voter ID laws, I think it will create a more trustful system throughout the United States, and thus leading to fewer of these controversies. I'm a strong believer that people should vote. I am also a strong believer that only eligible people who should vote. I have read within ballotpedia.org that former Kansas Secretary of State Chris Kobach stated that photo IDs have become unavoidable. You can't cash a check, board a plane, or drive without one. That is why it's not unreasonable to require picture identification to protect our most important privilege of citizenship. I can fully agree with this. Almost every aspect of our lives requires an ID, but the most important way we can influence our government does not. That is absurd. Personally, I didn't even realize that some states didn't require voter identification at poll boxes. I just assumed that it was mandatory throughout the entire country. If no requirement of a voter ID continues throughout our nation's voting system, it will soon crumble. It is only a matter of time before a huge voter fraud scandal takes place. I do not want a voter fraud scandal to take place, but it may be a requirement for the voter identification laws to become in full effect nationwide. For me, it is without question why we need voter identification laws throughout all 50 states.